What up, YouTube? All right, so today we have episode 4 of Magic the Blabbering. All right, so today we got a couple things to talk about. So what ended up happening over the course of yesterday, I guess, and on Monday of this week is we had the arena through the OMENPATHS cards spoiled for the, I believe 23rd is when they're coming out. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. I have some thoughts about the overall vibe of the set. Obviously I did a full set review of the Spider-Man, full set. That's on YouTube. If you have any time, you want to just put something on in the background and check that out, that would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, so big news as well is we had a little article that was posted on Standard's new banned and restricted date, which has been changed to November 10th. And then the final topic of today will be a few different decks that are worth talking about. Yeah, and I also have a new deck brew that I believe has just come out as well, Sultai Ouroboros. I hope you check that out as well. So, all right, let's get into it. So first on the list, we're going to be talking about the new standard banned and restricted announcement for November 10th. So first thing to note is that they moved the date from the end of November to the beginning of November to kind of address what's going on with Vivi and Agatha's Soul Cauldron just a little bit sooner. All right, so I will link and have some snips here because we're going to be kind of reading from the article, talking about the article. I'm not just going to blank read the article out. But yeah, for the most part, to sum it up, TLDR, they are aware that there is a huge problem with Agatha's Soul Cauldron and Vivi. And they have said this in the past. And some of their, reasoning behind that, not banning it, was they wanted to see how it would develop over time and if there would be, individual cards that could kind of deal with Vivi. And over the course of many years of Magic balancing, they've definitely held their ground against certain types of decks to see if they could have better counters. If it's like a hard counter, it's one deck just fully shuts it off. Everything in that deck just doesn't let them do what they want to do. Or there's a single card that a lot of decks could run that could kind of shut off their whole game plan. And for the most part, some decks are kept down by those philosophies and design practices, which is a good example is like reanimator decks, things that play out of the graveyard. And Vivi is also a reanimator deck. So, well, not a reanimator deck, but it plays out of its graveyard and uses Soul Cauldron. So definitely you can counter Cauldron if you wanted to be real spicy and had some extra money, I guess. You can go and buy your own Cauldrons and then put them in your deck and then, start stealing Vivis from people. We've seen that from a few different people. But yeah, overall, that's not really the tech people are going for, obviously, because Soul Cauldron costs about $60 to $70 a copy right now. So that's not really the best tech. So a lot of people are using Ghost Vacuum for that kind of stuff, or they're using Rest in Peace, or they're using Soul Guide Lantern. They're using Heritage Reclamation. But yeah, so if Vivi was that easy to be countered, obviously this wouldn't be a problem, and this would have never gotten to the point where everybody's clamoring for it to get to this point of being banned. Obviously, we have a bunch of reanimator decks in Standard with like Kona and Zombify. So those decks, specifically for MTGA, are being kept into best of one, where that type of graveyard hate and specific deck hate is kind of relegated to the sideboard. So if you're playing a mid-range deck in best of one on MTGA, you usually have to include stuff like that in your main board because you're making sure that you can play through certain decks in the main meta that can, kind of just win on turn 4 through some kind of like cheese like that. Especially with Kona, where Kona, like if you have any way to tap it and they have no way to interact with Kona, you can just put Omniscience into play and win the game right there. Put a Valgavoth into play and it becomes really hard to win. But yeah, so obviously that type of development for the meta for Vivi isn't coming. So what we had pop up was mono red aggro, putting in a single card that mono red aggro can play with Razorkin Needlehead. And then I think a couple Magebane Lizards on the sideboard, which for Vivi, that's not really a big problem for them since they don't need to like multi-spell per turn in order to kill you. So really the big thing that hinders them from winning is their main board being extremely greedy for the mirror match, for the control match, and then not having Torch the Tower as a 4 in their main as they used to. So that has resulted in mono red being able to stick Razorkin Needleheads and other things like that because they're pretty much all in on Floodmaw right now, which Floodmaw has raised to about $5 a copy. So it's definitely a result of that. So what that means is that mono red will probably be kind of a contender for best deck in the format, might be the best deck in the format, but mono red can't really pivot its main deck, right? So now it just is kind of like that's the deck you have to run. And then Vivi has the option to pivot. So we'll see what happens with the PTs that are coming up and the different RCs because we're out of RCQ season really. But yeah, so the whole point of this is, that Vivi can pivot and kind of play against their hard counter matchup, which is the mono red Razorkin kind of build, and kind of play through that. So there's a lot of ways for Vivi to bounce back out of this and still be tier 0. But yeah, so on to that same point, talking about where Vivi was pre-rotation. The deck was arguably much better. It had all the pieces that it has now. There's no extra pieces that it didn't have in July that it has now going into October, because now it's almost mid-September here. And it's probably not getting anything from the Spider-Man set. Really didn't get that much from the Edge of Eternity set other than like Quantum Riddler, which is really good. It's just a great card. But yeah, all it did from rotation was lose the Voldaren Thrillseeker, which was the best thing to do with Cauldron. And we saw that not only in Vivi, but we also saw it in the Roots deck as well, where it was very unfair under Cauldron. But it was so conditional on you making like a bunch of permanents that you couldn't really abuse Thrillseeker all the time. Those decks usually were kind of like on their side plan. And then if they hit a wall, which was likely, they could sacrifice, giant Makos or giant Tursa and throw 10 damage at your face and usually win through that. And I've stated that multiple times with how Vivi Cauldron has developed over time. It is not better than it was in July. Why was it not tier 0 then? There's a very, very good reason. And I doubt anybody would really disagree with this, is that Dimir was the best deck in the format because it had such efficient removal. And you could probably even look into Pioneer, why Vivi Cauldron isn't like super good in Pioneer, because if you look at that meta right now, it's just like mono red, Rakdos midrange and like Phoenix decks. Those are like the kings of Pioneer. It's probably because Pioneer has very efficient 1 mana removal that can kind of shut down Vivi Cauldron, because they have a lot of stuff they want to do on turn 1 and 2, and taking turn 2 off to play a Cauldron, usually ended up in them losing, their guys in the process of like, if you drop FOMO and you're not able to like buff it with profs, that usually sets you back at least 1 to 2 turns. By the time Tursa comes down and you have a profs and a Cauldron down and now a Vivi's in the yard and you want to go buff it, usually what happens is you get Shoot the Sheriff put on you, or some other like 2-mana removal spell. And then that's another thing that we lost is Go for the Throat. So there's other cards that don't get hit by Shoot the Sheriff, specifically Mako, because that's a pirate and that's an outlaw. So yeah, Dimir just had the best removal in the format, and that allowed it to also have the best lands in the format. So there was like multiple factors there that kind of led to Dimir being funneled into one of the best decks in the format. Anyways, so moving on from that, Dimir used to regulate it. That's the summation of that. So that's why the literal better version of VV wasn't tier 0, was because there was a mid-range tempo deck in the format that could regulate it so aggressively that now that doesn't have that same tempo, Dimir is still very efficient and good. But cut down not being in the format ends up having this result where you have these 1 to 2 drops that can't be answered if you're on the draw. So like to the point where like they can kind of just snowball out of control, and they can just, tap out turn 2 for Cauldron. And then Dimir can just like never deal with that other than a Beastbinder or a well-timed Tishana. So anyways, now back to the article here. So a couple things to note about the article is, the first couple paragraphs kind of signal that they know what's going on and they do care about it. And, again, with the way they're balancing standard right now with all the extra cards, the new rotation, everything is still up in the air. Not everything's figured out yet. What, people kind of assume is that, when they say 6 months ago or 4 months ago, back when like Corey still was legal, that they're still figuring it out. It doesn't mean that they figured it out over the course of summer, over the course of 2 months, because these are very long stretches of time they're talking about figuring things out in. So we're going to see big changes towards next year. And that's kind of what these first couple paragraphs are kind of talking about. And I'll read the second paragraph here. First, we do think we got our banned and restricted announcement timing windows wrong during this part of the year. So they admit that they got their windows wrong, which has resulted in us having very awkward timings with the banning windows. So we see them coming up, and obviously it's like right in the middle of RCQ season, or at the beginning, or at the end. So it's like, okay, well now we have to deal with it for this stretch of time, or now we're going to have to like, people who are competitive will have to invest into the $750 into the format in order to like have the advantage that they should. And one of the issues with tier 0 decks as opposed to a tier 1 deck is that there are many less answers to a tier 0 deck than there is a tier 1 deck. And to harken back to where Dimir was pre-rotation, Dimir still had a huge problem with go wide and like big token control decks. Like that wasn't something that Dimir could do super well in terms of like dealing with those decks. So they had GRIXIS command as well, which could deal with the go wide stuff, but now they don't have any of that. And I don't think Dimir is able to play a board wipe even if they wanted to at this point. So you can't actually wipe any boards with Dimir, and you weren't really doing it very efficiently pre-rotation either. So even though it was like right when rotation happened, it was like 40% of the meta. Like there were a lot of go wide decks that were still beating Dimir. It was just that everybody knew that Dimir was the clear best deck in the format, so everybody just jumped on it immediately. And it was like a micro meta where it was like a literal July meta. It was just 1 month, so there was nothing to do about it. You could have banned Curiosity. Maybe that would have regulated a little bit, but yeah, I'm still not on the train of ban Curiosity. I think that's a little bit crazy. It's a valid complaint that card does a little bit too much, but a lot of cards in Standard do a little bit too much right now. So it's about the things that do so much that you either have to tech your entire sideboard around it, or the deck is winning turn 3, which they've removed a lot of that stuff. And if you really want to play Pixie with like This Town Ain't Big Enough and Hopeless Nightmare, go try out Pioneer, because you can definitely play Pixie, Zenith with all that stuff in there, and it's actually pretty good and pretty fun. But yeah, you'll have to deal with the worst version of Mono Red that now dominates Pioneer. It's literally the best deck. That's a different discussion and different issue. But yeah, anyway, so they acknowledge that their timing with the banning announcements are completely off, and that's good to hear, because that then signifies that if this was to happen next year, which it probably will, because of, again, the amount of sets, the amount of just really, really boosted cards for these sets, and to harken back to one of my last podcasts, was Fire Design still alive? Yes, still is. There's still a lot of like very aggressive design happening. They're changing some of their design philosophies, specifically with longer standards still, which is having their 1 to 2 drops be so efficient that it turns standard into like a modern level tempo, without modern level answers. So having 1 to 2 drops dominate a format is fine if you have stuff like Force Negation, or, you know, similar types of removal spells like 1 mana removal that's extremely efficient, Fatal Push, Unholy Heat, things like that, that really kind of make it so you can't just snowball out of control all the time. And then unironically, when that kind of situation happens, you have things like Corey still actually be kind of healthy in the format, especially when MH3 is like designed to always power creep modern and rotate $1,000 decks. Having something like Corey still pop up is like very healthy, and it's really good for modern. So we want more stuff like that for modern, but we don't want it to just go crazy in standard, which it has been doing and probably will continue to do until we get to next year and we can see this aggressive style that they're talking about here. Because the next paragraph right after that, they're saying, to that end, we're going to be more aggressive next year with a number of banned and restricted announcement windows and the timing, adding more. So they made a mistake by saying that they would pull back and they would make it so it's like standard gets 1 window per year, really. And yeah, so they're changing that. So that means there's internal discussion going on, and they've now come to an agreement that yes, there needs to be more ban windows and we need to have them be more aggressive. So then RCQ season doesn't turn into this mess, because we have people, and I'll post some of these like takes here from people I've seen around the internet. I'll blur out some names and stuff, but also I'm one of these people where we have a person that I'm an acquaintance with, where they're talking about their children having decks, you know, that are like 10 to 12 years old, whatever. And yeah, they're not able to play their decks. And this is when you think about children playing this game, this is the audience that WotC wants to play their game. So we want their decks to be, you know, legal for as long as possible and for the foreseeable future. So their parents, who obviously have to buy their decks, aren't being like choked. And then obviously the parents that buy those decks also play Magic themselves. So, you know, this is a whole family event for people like this who have their decks be invalidated by 1 tier 0 deck. And so not only do you make it so now this 10-year-old or, you know, whatever is now experiencing the worst level of card balancing and ban announcements, they're immediately being to like, well, it's giving me anxiety going to their local store and just play some like fun pickup games, because they're assuming that they're going to play against tier 0. They probably wouldn't, obviously. But if they wanted to like enter into like a small like event, like a Friday Night Magic or whatever, like a store championship, they probably will be told by their parent who plays the format, like, there's going to be this, are you okay with playing in that? And they probably would opt out, because, you know, it's very anxiety inducing. It's very tough to have to like understand your deck's mortality. Like, your deck is good, daughter, but it is not good enough. So you will lose. And obviously they're not telling them that, but you're probably going to tell your child, like, it's going to be really hard, but you know, I believe in you. You can do it. And they're just going to be like, I don't want to do it. Can we go and just like play Hollow Knight, Silk Song, you know, play something else that's like not anxiety inducing? Because that's what happens when the format's like this. It's not so much about, you know, other decks not having like an ability to be played, because there are some decks that have the ability to be played. There's like Dimir, there's Mono Red, and you know, that's where the window kind of ends. Although this article states that there's a huge runner coming up, and we'll mention that in a minute. Yeah, it definitely makes it more anxiety inducing. It's not good for children. It's not good for adults. It's really only good for these people that have bought into the RCQ season. And when they hear there's a tier 0 deck, it'll give them a little bit more insurance, being like, well, I'm playing the best deck in the format. So it really comes down to me making the best decisions with the best deck in the format, which should put me over the top, while also having the best luck, of course, because Magic is an RNG based game. It's balanced by its lands and by drawing cards. That's where VV kind of skirts the line though, because it draws so many cards. So that's where being really good will also put you ahead of other people. So yeah, so there's those couple points here. It's like they're going to change the ban windows for next year. Obviously, they can't do it right now. And, you know, they are countering the fact that they can't just like ban VV Cauldron right now with shifting that date up from the end of November, which was the 24th, to the 10th. And this is because they made a statement that they would, you know, if they can, not interfere with the RCQ season to ensure that players playing competitive Magic can have insurance that their decks won't be interfered with. And it states here, next paragraph, this keeps the basic premise of not interfering with players who had planned their decks and travel for the standard RCQ season, while still moving up the announcement and giving players more time to prepare for World Championships should something change. So this is a good statement. Why? Because they're saying that they will do something about it in this window, which is November 10th. And while they made a promise to not put a banning window in the middle of the season, because that would interfere with people's travel and their planned decks, and they're being really careful with their wording here, because VV is a $750 deck to $800. This really skirts the line of saying, we know how much you spent on this deck, which they are not allowed to acknowledge that, because acknowledging the aftermarket, which means acknowledging the price of a deck based on singles, which Magic doesn't put the price on singles, the market does. This is illegal for them to do, so they're not allowed to acknowledge that we know you spent a lot of money on VV. All they're allowed to acknowledge is the fact that they prepared and planned this deck. So that means that they had to acquire the cards from boxes, you know, so when it's really just people buying singles. But they're careful with their wording there, because they're acknowledging that they prepared the deck through some means. They're not saying what means that was, but they can acknowledge that people have to prepare travel, and that does cost a lot. Like, say if you were going to the SCG tournament, which we acknowledged, and a lot of other podcasts and, you know, people who talk about Magic Standard have acknowledged as well, the turnout for the SCG was abysmal. It was 50% of last year, which was arguably a worse meta as well, because we had Beans and Mono Red and all that stuff. And it was 1,400. Now it was 600. So people who don't want to invest into this $750 deck, which WotC is not allowed to acknowledge, they just kind of opted to not go, because it was a waste of money. And so they knew that this was happening, and you have to, like, you know, plan to go to this SCG and then, you know, register. Obviously you're getting in because there was 1,400 spots open. And for most part, a lot of people just kind of went there. I even saw some people that had the ability to play VV Cauldron, but then opted to play other silly versions with those cards and ended up paying the price for it. But yeah, you would have to accept that trip is just kind of a vacation, and you would just have to take the brunt of that. It's not going to net you any money or anything like that. And for anybody who won those, in the top 32, congrats to you. Obviously, you had less of a pool to kind of fight through there, which is good for them, but it's bad overall for the entire circuit in general. This is not something that's good. Because not only these SCG tournaments and things like this having lower turnout, there's a lot of RCQs that are just straight up not firing. So people who would have had those opportunities to even get onto the Pro Tour, probably there's a lot of them that just straight up either had to invest into larger travel, or just were straight up not given the opportunity to do so. Or maybe had to scrape in arena. There's other people who do different things in order to get onto the Pro Tour. So yeah, it's not the greatest situation here with that. But yeah, so another point that Carmen's making here in her, standard ban article here, is what they're not going to do and why. So what we're not going to do is create previously unannounced emergency banning window in the middle of RCQ season, though it's worth noting that we have seen calls for it and discussed it. So they talked about banning stuff in the middle of RCQ season. Ultimately, we opted to stick more or less to what we had said to do for a few reasons. So they talked about banning VV Cauldron, and they opted to not do it because of the aforementioned reason, which is people planned travel and they prepared their decks, in quotes, prepared, acquired $750. And yes, so that is point one here. They pretty much made the decision to do this, which in an actual macro view of this, and she did not mean it this way, but a surprise change to the format hurts them the most, and it undermines our clearly stated goals for these announcements to provide players with the stability and knowledge to make their deck choices for events. So obviously, if you had the money and the ability to spend money for travel to buy VV, which is probably a $3,000 investment, just saying plainly and lightly, which is a lot of money. This is not like your couple $100 deck, you go into RCQ and then that's $5 in gas, whatever, more than that. But this is like thousands of dollars of investment here. This is not little amounts. So that's why we're seeing huge drop-offs of people. So they're defending those people who made these large investments from a place of privilege. And Magic already has this kind of and TCGs in general, trading card games, have this reputation of being pay to win. And this is them kind of inadvertently defending pay to win players. And this is this is not just me saying this. And I'm stating as well that she didn't mean it like this, but people are taking it like this. And I've seen a lot of people clamoring about these statements specifically, saying that they are defending this $750, $800 deck by saying this, and it creates this air of WotC kind of calling people broke boys, which, it's not entirely untrue because of the fact that this deck calls for you to have that disposable income. So Modern is such an extra format when it comes to playing competitively in Magic's, whole entire vibe, because they really want Standard to be the thing that people gravitate towards. So having this tier 0 deck cost $800 is a complete, that in itself, I wish they could acknowledge, although they would have to change how their game is sold in order to acknowledge this. But, for the best deck in the format to cost $800, puts it into this pay to win category, because you do need to have $800 to do it. And it's not It's not light. And me personally, I'm down like $500 to $1,000 playing other decks because I like to brew and I like to have fun. But unfortunately, during that brewing and having fun process, VV wasn't in there. Neither was Cauldron. So, you know, if I wanted to make one deck and play RCQs, I had to make the decision of playing like 3 decks, you know. So hindsight, my mistake. I shouldn't have carelessly invested my money into fun stuff. I should have just bought the best thing. And I probably will do that in the future, which is, you know, not very happy for me, but it is what it is. I can't go back on that. And I don't really care to, because I like my decks and, you know, I don't regret buying them. But as a competitive player, yeah, it's kind of a bummer for me because there's really no space for what I've built here. If VV wasn't the best deck, which requires many different colors worth of like removal and like tempo that my decks can sometimes have, yeah, but because of the investment of time and energy in order to just go there and go like last place, it's just really not worth it. So check in next RCQ season and I'll definitely be on that and I'll be giving you guys updates, or y'all get the updates. Which I hope there's somebody out there listening, be like, oh, that's cool, you know, or you agree, or, you know, you might have some decks that you know, put your heart and soul into and love, you know, because they're your baby, and they can't thrive right now because the WotC made an oopsie with their ban announcements last year, because they made these goals for what they wanted for standard, and they're not being flexible in changing them in time. So now we're in September and they're finally being flexible to shift up 20 days. But yeah, okay, so second point here, we believe that we will likely take action in November. VV is warping standard format and likely needs to go. We're unsure about Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So this, like my actual first podcast, I evaluated VV as a self 3-for-1, needs to be killed on site, even if it's not with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which there's a lot of kill on sites. But if you always look at Soul Cauldron's history as like, you know, because like I painted VV as like having this third condition, which was like A plus B plus C, which is like having non-creature spells and putting power onto VV, which drastically slows down VV. Agatha's Soul Cauldron bypasses that. And Soul Cauldron, you know, classically has had to worry about how many things it has under there, how many creatures you have on the board, how much mana you have. That's a huge one. How much mana you have. And then maybe after 3-4 conditions under Cauldron is like actually provided, with it not being interrupted at all. You can't have it bounced, you can't have it killed, and then you would have to put all that stuff back in your graveyard and then take a few turns to tap Cauldron and exile all that stuff again. So like, so many things need to go right for the old version of the Cauldron combos, that when you compare it to VV just being one, just all-in-one combo by just one card, you can't even look at Soul Cauldron as like part of the problem, because it's just a VV. You know, if VV was able to just be behind a veil, like a little puppet master pulling the strings, which lore-wise is inaccurate. He's just a silly little guy. It was always Kuja pulling the strings, the little puppet master. Yeah, we love VV. VV's not the bad guy, but he is used for evil, obviously. And that is lore accurate. Him being used for evil, that's lore accurate. So anyways, removing VV from the equation instantly fixes the problem. Maybe Soul Cauldron gets broken from something else. We wouldn't know. I wouldn't know because I don't know the cards that are coming out. But someone like Carmen would. So if those both get banned, it's probably because something down the pipeline before Wilds of Eldraine rotates in 2027 will break Cauldron again. Then they'll ban both. But yeah, overall, again, they're not going to, you know, turn a blind eye towards VV because Final Fantasy and Square Enix has some kind of shadow deal with WotC. They will just ban it because they need to ban it. the reason why they haven't banned it is not because of some conspiracy with Square Enix. It's because of the promises they made last year about making sure RCQ season is chill and people have decks to play and their game is playable. This kind of harkens against what people think is happening to the game right now, where they want to make it a collector game, where it's like Pokemon, where actual constructed decks in Pokemon cost like $50 to $100 because almost no one plays the game. Yeah, because the game is so hard collected that even the collector cards that are like thousands of dollars per card, they're just like, they're not playable in the constructed, either because they're too expensive for what they do or whatever. They're just an awesome art and foiling treatment that people are just like, oh, I love it. And it's like, they have their own prices because of that. It's not because of how sought after they are in the format. It's, you know, all the Jolteons aren't like 2010 Tarmogoyf. Like, it's not the same thing. So if you wanted to like have some assurance that Magic isn't going towards that, then just trust that they are trying to balance their format and that they just have to keep changing stuff. Things happen over a long span of time. So that's why things look so shitty and feel bad, you know? And I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying this to other people, because it does feel bad for me. Obviously, I made an investment into the standard and I'm not able to play this standard because of what's happened with VV. So anyways, so number 2 here, which is, you know, what I was just talking about with, they do believe that VV is warping. But yeah, but we also don't think the format has reached its final form, which would give us the clearest direction to set standard up for long-term success. And what do I mean by that? Here we see VV right now. VV Cauldron decks are disproportionate in the metagames shares and top finishes, but Mono Red obviously won the SCG. So, you know, that was one very specific hard counter deck with one specific hard counter card that could be played by Mono Red, by the way. So they're also seeing that Mono Green Stompy has been taking places in like Magic Online challenges. They're referencing like, I think, one challenge here with this. So while that doesn't give Mono Green Stompy this like, oh, this can also beat VV, like it means I can high roll against VV. It's the same situation with Dimir, where Dimir has literally, out of 32 player challenges, gone first among 1 out of 8, the rest of the decks being VV Cauldron on MTGO. So I challenge her to also reference Dimir when she talks about Mono Green Stompy like this, because we also need to acknowledge that there are other decks that can also beat VV Cauldron, but when they stumble in the very slightest, they do not have a chance. And I played Mono Green Stompy and I've definitely been able to beat it because they have the ability to take out Cauldron, they have the ability to take out Profs, and they have the ability to get bigger than all their stuff. And the only thing that really slows down Mono Green Stompy is into the Flood Maw. So, you know, because everything gets bigger than what Torch can deal with. So they need their Flood Maws in order to beat Cauldron, or I'm sorry, not Cauldron, in order to beat Stompy. But if Stompy stumbles at all, like they have like only a turn 3 play, or they have like the ability to play turn 2, and like they miss their Ouroboros, or they miss all their interaction for the Cauldron and the Profs, they just lose. This is just the same exact situation as Dimir, which again can beat Cauldron. But again, they're not allowed to stumble in the slightest. So person going second in with Mono Green Stompy in a challenge is somebody just high rolling, having a great run with the deck and just going like 7-1. And I've had this type of like situation with these decks as well. And it's just, you have to high roll so hard. It's not worth, you know, investing too hard into, and you can't go and just say that this is like the next one up. It means that there's like another deck that can possibly high roll. But yeah. So anyways, like moving on from that, definitely in the last point that they make here, things are unstable for high competitive play, but then things are fine with most things, and then references MTGA. This is, I I don't know. I wouldn't call this off base, especially because I'm talking about a pro level, like balancing team member and designer and pro player. I don't want to question these types of ticks too hard. But when you're talking about MTGA, you have a lot of people that are there playing decks that they can buy for free, technically, next to free. Everything on MTGA is very cheap in comparison to like what you have to do in paper. Obviously, because I could spend $100 on MTGA for like 2 months, brew 10 decks, whereas like I find like my best win rate decks, it's like Sultai, Cosmogoyf, my Grixis decks, which like have gone like 20 and like 5 and gotten me like high mythic and all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is good. I'm going to go brew them and then take them to the RCQ and actually build them in paper. And then it ends up like, no, it's because I wasn't facing enough tier 1 and those brews actually aren't as good as I want them to be. And they kind of just like, again, the same thing. Like I stumble at all and Vivi can just like literally run me over. So yeah, it hurts. It hurts to have that type of take because MTGA is full of people trying to have fun. And so you might go like 2 days without seeing a single Cauldron deck. And that's not because Cauldron is bad. It's because people just don't want to play it and they're kind of bored of it. A lot of content creators will climb off stream with it if they want to hit like top rank 10 or something. I've seen this a lot lately where I've been like, oh, this person's playing Demir like rank 2, rank 1. Then I check their Untapped and there's like, okay, there's 40 games of Vivi. There's the missing piece here. So it's like that kind of stuff you see and then you're just like, yeah, the arena ladder is actually like rose-colored glasses. It's not that it's distorted. It's that it's people that are playing casually. And the casual with ranked kind of meshes in this weird way where people will play their casual decks to like a high level because they played it so much. And yeah, but what MTGA really puts into perspective is that there's a wide variance of decks that can be played in standard right now. And if you were to move some of this like top tier, like tier 0 stuff going on, which mono red aggro loses to a lot of the stuff in the meta. So it's like really geared towards just beating Cauldron. But yeah, it'll lose to a lot of things like Ouroboros or Demir or Orzhov Ketchumos. Like there's a lot of things that just kind of shut mono red down. So when it comes to like, is mono red going to take over after Vivi gets banned? Probably not, because the variance for that deck of like what beats it is the stuff that should beat stuff, where you're able to just put in removal for things and that kills a Screaming Nemesis. So, you know, that is what you want to see for a meta where you have something like mono red be like one of the best decks in the format, and then people just start like playing these kind of more mid-rangey decks and then kind of balancing everything out. But yeah, with the VV meta right now, with it being the best thing to do competitively, if everybody was really sweating their ass off on MTGA, we would see things like MTGO where the top 30 decks and players in the format are the ones that are playing the most VV. And there's not really much of a payoff to sweat that hard on MTGA, so there's no reason to do that. So giving MTGA as a reason that things aren't this distorted, it's not really the best. And I think that it's not like me saying that from not being a professional designer, balance team member of WotC. I don't think I'm off base for saying that. I think a lot of people would agree with that. And that while I do understand and appreciate that she's referencing that, it's really not the catch-all that she's kind of like hinting that it is, nor is this kind of like mono green Stompy as a come up and how we haven't seen the meta fully develop. But I mean, it's true that the meta hasn't fully developed because it's only like a couple months old. With the way it is right now, I think they should know better than everybody else that while we do have some more sets coming out over the future, they have to be like, you have to go and take those decks that could possibly be made. They should have playtest be testing all these decks against VV and probably seeing them fall short, or they might even see that the VV deck doesn't need a single damn card from these new sets, and the deck is completely solved as is, which even makes the meta worse. So we don't see the deck evolving other than like maybe one card. You know, Spider-Man 2099 goes into the VV deck. Wow, awesome. Yeah, so in summation of like this article here, just like a quick rant, quickish rant. Yeah, it definitely needs to be solved. Is VV going to rotate out in terms of like it getting solved through other like meta calls from people? Not really. And with the representation of mono red being like the thing that can beat it, VV can pivot towards mono red if they really need to. So they can put all their interaction back in main with Torch and kind of shoot the Razorkins down and then try to stomp through it. And then they can also just like end up having a meta where there's only 2 decks that are playable and Dimir is just like completely irrelevant, which it can't be. Like Dimir is like the canary in the bottom of the mine. Like when Dimir stops being playable, that's really when you have a huge problem. So we're seeing that right now, and they see it all as well. They want to give it a little bit more time to incubate, but overall, over the course of the next month, which it'll be for the most part, November 10th is actually coming up pretty quick. More than likely they will ban BV, and you will have to just take that hit to whoever invested into that, and then just pivot onto something else, because there's a lot of people who are very competitive with the game and have spent a lot of money, and they knew, and you should always know this whenever you buy a tier 1, tier 0 deck, that if it's a tier 0 deck, expect a ban. Expect a ban, next ban window, always. So the reason why it's not banned right now, to sum up, is because the windows were scheduled incorrectly and they didn't want to interject a window into the RCQ season, invalidating people's willingness to travel to events. And that's a really big thing for them. But yeah, overall, they're going to have to take some type of issue with this, because it's not even that people are not even willing to travel at all. They're not even registering. And it's not about people not thinking that their deck's going to be legal. It's because people just don't want to play the format. And we're seeing this not only with events firing, but for people digesting standard content. People don't even care to watch it. I'm seeing a lot of creators kind of drop off half of their retention and stuff because people just aren't there to watch it. Obviously not talking about me, because I'm kind of a very small creator here, but yeah, for the people who do have a footing and have a voice in the community here, it's not looking good for them right now, and they're kind of struggling. So I would urge anybody who happens to see this to support everybody you can, to leave likes, subscribe, and comments wherever you can, or do all the same here. But yeah, that's going to be enough about that. I'm pretty done talking about VV. Yeah, I've made my acceptance about my decks. It's good to see that the balance team is kind of looking at it as well, and is stressed, and is, you know, they're getting strain put on them to make decisions here, and they're doing their best. So that's all we can hope. We're not going to send any mean comments towards Carmen or anybody on the balance team, because we see that they're working hard and they're trying to make things as good as they can with what they're able to do, because it's not just one person making a decision. And even if it's a group of them, it also comes down to Big Daddy Watsy making another decision on top of them. So anyways, moving on to the next thing. So we had Spider-Man get fully spoiled, and that means that the next installation of Spider-Man, which is through the OMENPATHS, has also been spoiled. So I would like to make a couple comments about it, because I made some comments about it in my last podcast, as well as just talking about, did an entire set review and all that stuff. So I want to give my thoughts about the way this whole thing kind of looks. So overall, I think that the my first take with everything is everything kind of looks pretty cool. Just to be like positive about it. Everything looks cool. Everything looks perfect for in-universe stuff. I will say though, and this is my biggest critique with it all, is that it looks random as hell. And when I heard through the OMENPATHS, my first impression was that this would be something like, it doesn't need to be a plane, I guess, which it would be nice. I kind of expected through the OMENPATHS to be like through the OMENPATHS : here. So we're going to a place that had a theme towards what this in-universe version of this set should be. But it looks like it's just through the OMENPATHS 1. And this is on me for having this type of like expectation about what should happen. But yeah, so it isn't any specific place. And because of that, it's a bunch of random stuff. It is like just straight up the most random things that you could imagine. It goes to even places that were like in older Magic as well. I think the good representation is like the ultimate Green Goblin, like referencing some arena that's like a super, super old arena. But yeah, so like if you're looking towards cohesion, this has no cohesion. It is almost like it's using art that was like unused from a lot of sets over the years, not even just like over like the most current sets. It looks like it's using art from like old Lorwyn stuff and from just stuff that was lying around. And I know for a fact that artists were definitely hit up for like some more art of a certain style that they were doing. Like I've seen stuff on Blue Sky from people that did art for Bloomburrow, that were asked then to do more stuff for this, which just one reference here is Strength of Will by Rhonda Libby. She has a post on her Blue Sky saying that she was asked to do more art. So that directly goes against what I just said, which is looks like there's a bunch of stuff that was laying around. So yeah, they definitely did ask a bunch of artists that they have previously worked with, and they had a direction with like, like here's, Tyran Tusk, the unwisely awoken spider boar hero. It's not Peter Porker anymore. And this is one that I would personally like. If I saw this card, I'd be like, I want this in paper because I think Peter Porker's a fucking joke. And this is what a lot of people feel about this is like some of these art styles I really want in paper. Other things in terms of like the way it looks, it just feels empty. There is no flavor text whatsoever. The art doesn't make any sense together. The most cohesive elements of the entire, like through the OMENPATHS, is that symbiotes are spiky spiders. They're like very spiky. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but I guess it's symbiote is a spiky guy. Kind of like the Phyrexian or similar to like a sliver Phyrexian, where they're just very spiky. Don't know what that's supposed to mean, but yep, symbiotes are very spiky. And then the spider heroes, almost for the like in general, for the most part, are a dude riding a spider. Don't know how I feel about it entirely, but my full feelings about it is that looks fun. It's like the spiders are like little guys that the dude's on. So the spider riders are pretty cool. I just wish that they put the spider riders in like some section of like Ikoria or something. Like I feel like they could have done this entire like through the OMENPATHS, Ikoria, and then name a region, like some region in Ikoria, and be like traversing through X region in Ikoria, and then this is like a place with a bunch of spiders where they live in harmony with the spiders, and they have a bunch of other animals there as well as goblins and other things. And I just wish they made some kind of like some kind of theme around it, because it just feels so empty to me and so uncohesive that I'm not super stoked to play with these things. because of it. There's something about it, like, because like we'll have like, you know, just looking at two cards side by side, we have Skivix the Augmenter, which is the Symbiote Spider-Man Demir card. And then right next to that, we have Turl, the Entropic Hunger, which is like the Morbius card. And then this is like the Spiky Spider Symbiote. And then Turl is just like an Edges of Eternity Monoist. And I'm just like, just looking at these two things together is so jarring. And then you have like Uharis the Storm Spinner right next to all these, and this is on Scryfall. And this is like where Magic using like Scryfall. This is all the stuff that like is cool about the set. We have like dudes riding like peacock spiders that like little jumping spiders that have like a bunch of cool like little, they do like a little dance and then they do a jump and they're all like pretty looking. I love those spiders. Like those spiders are like the little homies. And I wanted them to have their own little story. Like, is it too much to ask to just get like basic story on this? Like, and just have some type of direction? I guess it was because they wanted to go and like have Giant Craft Helm look like it was straight out of like old Lauren, and then just have that right next to like something that looks like it's straight out of like, it's not Kaladesh, but you know, like an Aether type of contraption right next to that. And just like when I see those two types of arts together, I don't know, something about it just takes me out. I'm just like not super stoked to see that. What I do like is that these things are in universe, and it feels better to look at these arts in general as opposed to like seeing New York referenced on so many different cards. Not that I have anything against New York. It's just that there is a slight amount of immersion, because I do love lore and I love reading stories, that when I see the things together in one like setting, it makes me more likely to both brew the card and to put the card along with something. When I see a bunch of random cards like this, it makes me feel lost and almost overwhelmed, because I don't have any type of like signpost making me want to go here, other than, you know, something says mayhem, so I'll put the mayhem thing in there. But it's not like, you know, like Ruzik booed but victorious. This is like such a terrible name on a card, but the art is just like some of the craziest shit I've ever seen. And this is the arena that I was referencing earlier. It's just like, I forget exactly what arena it is. It's like a very, very old, like I think two-headed giant set. I can't remember exactly which one, but this is the art that's just like, they could have made a little story behind this and it would have been like totally awesome. But yeah, so overall, I don't want to yap about this one too hard, because it's kind of more of a subjective thing than anything. Because you can have your opinions about individual cards here. You can have your opinions about, you know, the overall set as a whole. I feel like this is one of those things that either you just hate all of it or you're okay with some of it. And I'm on the camp of like okay with some of it, and then my general feeling and like as a whole is I feel lost and it looks empty. And that's kind of how I feel about Spider-Man in general. There's a lot of cool stuff that I like about Spider-Man, but overall there's something missing, some kind of like extra juice to that set that just feels empty in general. I wish it didn't feel that way, but it does. And I know it's because it started as a 100 card set, you know, especially coming from something like Final Fantasy that had like 4 years of hard work and like 300 plus cards. And like, we were coming from something that was so great and so well designed, something like Spider-Man, where like we're just missing so much. And it's not because Mark Rosewater and the rest of the team did a poor job. It's that they were handed kind of a shit sandwich. And this is something that everybody was very, very excited about. And specifically for the Magic, you know, Universes Beyond stuff. And I know for a fact that they've said like Universes Beyond from a whole started as like they had to go and approach other people in order to get the rights to do stuff. And now that Final Fantasy has taken off, Lord of the Rings and all these other things have taken off, which all this stuff is planned around the like when Lord of the Rings dropped, and so they've been approached by other IP since then. But Marvel was something that WotC had to approach, according to Mark Rosewater in an interview. And so I believe that Marvel Disney was able to call some more of the shots in terms of like the contract, and that's why we ended up with this hodgepodge of digital and analog versions of the cards, which are not great. This is not something we like. This is not a good representation of where standard should be going in terms of like this confusing like hodgepodge. And I will also say that for people who think that standard Universe Beyond sets are going to be like Spider-Man, I would say that you're wrong just in general, because of the fact that this was planned so poorly like a couple years ago. And they had to kind of like patchwork it back together while working on other sets. I would say probably this is going to be the anomaly. Of course, I can be wrong, and there can be more shit sandwiches kind of like this, where we have, you know, good stuff in there, but mostly it's going to be filler cards that probably won't be able to be played in standard. And then we're going to have like this blatant lack of removal problem, and all the instants and sorceries are going to be pretty much unplayable other than like a couple like random blue rares. Yeah, like that's my biggest critique about both Spider-Man as a set and the Through the Omen Paths is like it just feels empty. It feels disjointed. And it was supposed to be like the easy one to do. But yeah, like there's something missing from all of it. And I think that this looks like a step below where the cohesion of like even an alchemy set is. So yeah, I don't know. It's just really not impressive. I love the spider riders. I love the symbiotes. And why do I love them? I can just sum up to them having a cohesive and original direction for what they're doing here, because they had to. They couldn't just, you know, put in like spider doing thing and he's like a human. I don't know. So yeah, that's how I feel about that. Anyways, I'm sure everybody has their own opinion on it, but if you have a thought or whatever, I would love to hear it. I'd love to talk about it. But yeah, so this is probably my biggest gripe with Through the Omen Paths. I don't think it's super great. It doesn't really make me want to spend money on Arena for these cards, although I probably will anyways. Just like some of these spider riders are just like a vibe. And then there's like the lizard man, just like straight up Glarb as a lizard. Like I love that card. The Bloomburrow ones I loved. Some of the Duskmourn ones are pretty fun as well. But yeah, overall, I could have done with a little bit more cohesion. They could have put this somewhere and had other things like show up for whatever reason, write a little story. I think it would have been awesome. But overall, it just looks like a straight up like soup. It just looks like soup. Minus all the good things about the symbiotes and the spider riders. The rest of it looks like soup, and it doesn't make any sense, and it throws me off and makes me unhappy. But yeah, overall, it's all right. I'm going to live with it. It's not something I'll be like, I'll go and scream from the heavens about. But yeah, anyways, so moving on to our last topic here, we got a couple decks I wanted to kind of mention here. The first one is something I could have mentioned a couple weeks ago, but we were talking about some other decks. Is going to be Jund Onslaught. So this is a deck that kind of came up through MTGO leagues. It hasn't really done super well in challenges, but few things are, other than I guess Monochrome Stompy. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting deck. Even like a piece of this deck has now found its way into the Teamer Battlecrier deck, which that doesn't need any reporting because that is a very commonly played deck. But yeah, so what this deck is trying to do is trying to play like Pugnacious Hammer Skulls, Ice Soul Explorer for ramping, I guess. Like ramping is pretty good. But yeah, this is just an early version of this deck. I'm going to share here. A lot of different ways to play it. Play Land of War Elves, Insidious Fungus to slow down VV Cauldron, Molt Tender to again ramp, and then Hammer Skull to have it as a good blocker. The whole reason you don't want to like swing in with that is because this deck can win in one turn. So what you do is you plot the Railway Brawler, and then you play Devastating Onslaught after ramping a little bit, and Devastating Onslaught for like 2 pretty much will win, but you can Devastating Onslaught for 3 and overkill them. And Railway Brawler, what he says is that whenever another creature enters the battlefield under control, put X 1/1 counters on it, where X is its power. So we can do this with Brawler, and then copy Brawler a bunch of times, which with Devastating Onslaught gives them all haste, and we can get like 2 20 power tramplers in one turn, and then just like one-shot anybody from any situation. I've seen pictures of people like do like 1,000 damage with like, you know, 15 mana on a Devastating Onslaught. You're just like, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot because it's exponential. So, and like when you have more than one Brawler, they're all just stacking their counters and then doing the based on its power. So you get like +5, and then plus the other 2, it'll do another 2 times. So it'll just like multiply it multiple times. So it's, yeah, exponential growth on the Brawlers there. It can also do a Smuggler's Surprise on the end of your opponent's turn and put like 2 Brawlers into play, and you can win like that as well. So yeah, just a really fun deck. It's very explosive. Its sideboard plan is kind of like the Jund thing, where it can like have some more removal, like Tragic Trajectory, Bitter Triumphs, Storm Brood, Vaultborn Tyrant, if you want to get a little bit stompy with like some other like control deck or Dimir deck or something that you can kind of like play around. But yeah, so it's a really fun deck, worth trying out, worth playing, and yeah, it's definitely worth your time. And because it's so cheap, if you play it on MTGO, it costs 16 ticks. Tabletop, I think it's like about 250 or something like that, but maybe closer to 300 right now, just because of the Ice Steel Explorer and Vaultborn Tyrants being so expensive because of Commander. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty fun deck. Really fun brew on Arena if you want to just kind of like crank out some wins. Definitely worth playing. All right, the next one is the special mention, special tech from Mono Green Stompy, and other names for like Mono Green Aggro, you know. But anyway, so this deck is really good. Obviously, it's top 2ing some challenges, and this is the actual second place deck, went 7-2 in a challenge, and it is 5-0ing many different challenges. If you look on MTG Goldfish, it is top 2'd a challenge once. So it's not going to just win a bunch of challenges for you, but there was one time back in the day, which was like a week ago, where it actually high rolled its ass off and was able to beat a bunch of VV decks. And on the ladder, I've been able to beat a bunch of VV decks as well with this. It just really comes down to like whether or not you're able to sideboard and get your sideboard cooking like super well, and then on game 1 you want to be able to stomp them out. Any like techs I would have for this, maybe Tifa's Limit Break can probably come out for like, I would say like a Snakeskin Veil or something like that. But yeah, this is how you can like kill them in one turn. This is really good with the Hemosymbic Might. So Might with Ouroboros goes a little bit crazy. So this is like when it taps, it puts its power onto another creature, and then you can you know, just kind of like go out of control. It's really, really low to the ground as well. Only caps an Ouroboros. Ouroboros, one of the best cards in Standard right now, outside of the blue-red packages or blue-black packages. This is like what's carrying all the green decks right now. So this card is going up in value. I'm debating whether or not I want to buy a full set right now, because I'm not sure if I want to just like invest in the Standard anymore right now, because I've already built enough decks. But if there was another card I would buy for Standard paper right now, it would be Ouroboros. It's definitely worth it on MTGO. Only 27 ticks for this deck. So yeah, really good deck. Its sideboard's pretty much loaded to the brim with both things that make it a little bit more stompy, and then like with the railway brawlers, and then also has Torpor Orb to shut off bounce decks, and then has like 4 reclamations and 2 scrap shooters to just keep on, you know, shutting down VV Cauldron. So on the best situation, you might be able to get the coin flip win and then stomp somebody out with like a turn 3 Ouroboros, and then, you know, on game 2 you're able to put in all your hate for the VV piles and then blow up all their profs and their cauldrons, because you have to blow up both, and then they won't be able to do anything because the IZZET deck does not get as big as this. So if you're able to slow them down for a bit, you can win like turn 5, 6, and you'll do it pretty consistently. But yeah, so mono red aggro, or sorry, mono green aggro is the other kind of fun tech for this. All right, and for the last deck here, which is kind of more of a fun honorable mention, it's not really like something that's meta, but it is fun. It is fun. I'm gonna do a video on this pretty soon, probably for my next week's deck brew. I might even start going up to 2 brews per week or something like that, but we're starting low. There's a lot of like editing and stuff, and this is still a hobby, so we're just chugging along here. But we're gonna go with this with GRIXIS Haste. So GRIXIS Haste was a deck that was playable last rotation, and also it is pretty playable now. I hit Mythic with it last season, and I'm brewing a lot right now, so I'm kind of bouncing up and down Diamond and stuff. But yeah, this deck is really fun. I'm probably going to just like jam this only for to like get to Mythic and stuff, and maybe that'll be my video. But for the most part, what this deck is centered around is around Frostcliff's Siege, and you can also play Summon Brynhildr, and then put haste on a lot of different things. You can put haste on Dragonhawk, Fate's Tempest, Cecil. Cecil is just in there kind of as a very premium 1-drop to kind of like hold down the line for a little bit. But yeah, I put in Oil Deep Gearhulk and Anti-Causal Vestige, as well as Quantum Riddler. So all those things can be hasted with the Frostcliff Siege, and they all gain Trample. So those having Trample, like specifically the Slasher and the Cruel Claw, like those can just go out of control. So most of my games are won by the Slasher getting haste and Trample, but the other half is kind of like won by Cruel Claw cheating one of my big guys in. Like Boiler Bilge is like a crazy card to just have snuck in and gain haste. Obviously you can't sneak it in with Cruel Claw or Vestige and like swing the same turn, but it getting played for free is huge. So playing Anti-Causal Vestige on say like turn 6, and then playing a Quantum Riddler and hasting them both in for like 11 damage. Well, that would actually be more than 11 damage, because it would be +1 and Trample and haste. So you get 5 damage from Riddler and then 8 damage from Vestige. So that would be like 13 damage, plus putting in a Boiler Bilge after you warp out. So that would be another 4 damage. So, you know, it's like pretty much lethal right there on turn 6 if you warp both of those things. And then we can also play Kefka, which any chance I get to play Kefka, I will take. And then the rest of this deck is pretty much Grixis Hate. So ton of like, you know, 2-mana removal spells. On the sideboard, we have a Braids, Annul, Duress, Fire Magic, Ghost Vacuum, Intimidation Tactics, Strategic Betrayal. All these things are pretty good. Definitely worth the time. I'm going to be entering some NTGO like leagues with this pretty soon here. I got everything I need. I just have to buy the Cruel Claws now, because I was playing Preacher of the Schism over Cruel Claw for a bit, but I went back to the Cruel Claw because it just can be like explosive, especially if I do it post playing like a Frostcliff Siege or on turn 3 with haste with Brynhildr. So big fan of this deck. I think it's really fun. Yeah, definitely worth trying out if you love Grixis. The minute I saw Anti-Causal Vestige, like I knew that this is something I wanted to play. And I saw like one of my buddies also trying it out. I was like, oh yeah, they were doing some other things with this, but pretty much this is like the brew that I've had like crank out a bunch of wins. Obviously it's playing a ton of creatures with 27 in there, so you could probably put in some like draw spells or some more like removal in the main. But yeah, overall, good deck. I think it's fun. If VV gets out of the way at some point here, this can be like a very solid tier 2 to 1.5 deck that maybe could be like a actual contender in competitive stuff. And at that point, I would need to like, you know, alter some like mainboard things here, and like put in probably some more interaction, some more counter spells. But yeah, very fun deck. Definitely worth playing. And this is one of those decks that whenever you see a set, things can just go in here. Like anything in Grixis can just go in. And that's what I love about this deck, is that it's so malleable to every set, and you can just put stuff in here. It doesn't have to like necessarily synergize other than just being like a really good card that does a cool thing when it enters or attacks in the Grixis colors. So obviously Vestige and Riddler were perfect additions for this. And yeah. Anyways, the MTGO version is not going to have Riddler because I'm not going to spend $100 for 2 copies of that, because it's $50 on MTGO for a Riddler right now. But yeah, we got other things to put in over that. So yeah, that's going to be the podcast for today. Hopefully you got some good entertainment out of this, or you had some feelings that you might have had about either the standard ban changes that just popped up today, or about the Spider-Man set in general. Obviously, we feel a little bit empty and tired from this Through the OMENPATHS card image gallery. Love those Spider Riders though. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, had fun. I know I'm chilling. Be sure to like or subscribe or leave a comment. It would really mean a lot. I work really hard on these, so it would mean a great deal if you were to do any of that. Yeah, and appreciate you. I will see you again next week on Wednesday. These are going to be dropping at 4 p.m. unless my internet, like last week, goes out on Wednesday. So yeah, appreciate you.